Every woman in Nocturne wanted to be chosen by the Korean Mafia boss. The black bartender he couldn't stop watching wanted to see him executed. He knew. He hired her anyway. Nights at Nocturne didn't just pulse. They devoured. The meatpacking district club was a sensory weapon. Violet lasers sliced through industrial smoke like sniper sights. The bass didn't just play. It vibrated in the marrow of your bones. A second, darker heartbeat forcing everyone into its rhythm. The air tasted of expensive vice. The metallic tang of adrenaline, the cloying sweetness of champagne, and the suffocating weight of secrets being bought and sold in velvet booths. Every soul who pushed through those heavy steel doors came hunting something: oblivion, power, or the dangerous illusion that they could touch the untouchable and walk away unburned. At the center of that beautiful, terrible storm sat Jang Ji-sub. He occupied the corner booth. The throne, with the terrifying stillness of a predator who had long ago run out of things to fear. He didn't need to speak to be obeyed. He didn't need to move to command the room. He simply existed, watching the chaos with eyes the color of black amber, sharp enough to flay a man's intentions from his soul with a single glance. The geometric serpent tattooed on his neck seemed to writhe under the strobe lights, a living warning coiled against his jugular. He was the owner of Nocturne, the head of the Geomin Syndicate, a man whose three-strike rule was the only law that mattered in this zip code. Nobody survives mistake number 3. Women orbited him like moths drawn to an incinerator. They draped themselves over the railings, laughing too loudly, smiling with teeth that showed too much hunger, desperate to be the one to thaw the Ice King. Ji-sub looked through them like they were smoke. Power was routine. Adoration was boring. Then, there was Sienna Cole. 3 months she had stood behind his bar. 3 months, and she hadn't given him a single look that wasn't filled with cold, professional indifference. She moved through the neon haze with a brutal efficiency that made the other bartenders look like amateurs. Her hands created art from ice and liquor, but her face was carved from stone. No flirtatious smiles for the big tippers, no fear for the gangsters, just a terrifying, singular focus. The black vest she wore looked less like a uniform and more like body armor. Her silence tore through the noise louder than any track the DJ played. Ji-sub told himself it was just annoyance, a strategic interest in an employee who refused to fall in line. It felt disturbingly like fascination. He watched her now, tracking her movements over the rim of his whiskey glass. A customer, drunk on courage and overpriced vodka, reached across the bar and grabbed Sienna's wrist. "Come on, sweetheart. You're too pretty to look so mean. Smile for me." Ji-sub's security detail tensed, waiting for the signal to intervene. Ji-sub didn't give it. He waited. Sienna didn't pull away. She didn't scream. She didn't look for help. She moved. It was a blur of violence so efficient it was almost beautiful. In one fluid motion, she trapped the man's hand, twisted his wrist into a hyper-extended kotegaeshi lock, and slammed his chest against the bar. The glass in her other hand didn't even spill. She leaned over the counter, her lips brushing the man's ear. Ji-sub couldn't hear what she whispered over the pounding bass, but he saw the result. The blood drained from the man's face, leaving him ashen. When she released him, he didn't argue. He didn't fight. He ran for the exit like he was escaping a burning building. Sienna straightened her vest, picked up a rag, and wiped the spot where the man had touched her bar. Her expression hadn't changed. In the shadows of his booth, Ji-sub's mouth curved. Not his usual polite, businesslike smile. This was something feral. Delighted. He didn't want a doll. He wanted the wolf in the vest. What Ji-sub couldn't see, what Sienna's perfect mask hid, was the fire burning in her gut. She wasn't wiping the bar to clean it. She was doing it to hide the trembling in her hands. Sienna Cole wasn't there to mix drinks. She was there to put Jang Ji-sub in the electric chair. She checked her watch. 11:14 p.m. Former FBI profiler. Disgraced, discarded, and now working off the books deep undercover. She had spent 3 months building the profile. The meatpacking butcher. The serial killer who had been vanishing women from these streets for 3 years. Wasn't a ghost. He was the man sitting in the throne. She had tracked the timeline. She had mapped the blind spots in the cameras. She had analyzed the victimology. Every piece of evidence pointed to Jisub, especially Thursday nights. At 11:17 p.m., exactly, he would disappear into the sub-basement. No guards, no cameras, just him and the darkness. And when he returned, the faint chemical smell of bleach and ozone would cling to his tailored suit. The scent of a crime scene scrubbed clean. Tonight was Thursday. Sienna felt the weight of the stolen keycard burning against her hip. Tonight, she wouldn't just watch. She was going down there. She was going to find the evidence, call in her team, and end the reign of the King of Nocturne. She risked a glance at the booth. Jisub was staring right at her. For a second, her breath hitched. His gaze felt heavy, physical, like a touch on the back of her neck. Does he suspect? No. Monsters were arrogant. He didn't see an agent. He saw a challenge. He saw a bartender playing hard to get. She checked her watch again. 11:17 p.m. As if on cue, Jisub stood. He buttoned his jacket, scanned the room one last time, and turned toward the restricted hallway. Sienna waited 10 seconds, then untied her apron. "Bathroom break?" she muttered to the barback. She slipped into the crowd, moving toward the shadows, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She was the hunter. She was the law. She was closing the net. In the silence of the restricted hallway, Jang Jisub paused. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. He pressed a finger to the hidden earpiece in his right ear. "She's moving," his head of security murmured over the comms. "She's following you, boss. She has the keycard." Jisub stared at the steel door of the basement, a dark amusement glittering in his eyes. Sienna Cole thought she was invisible. She thought she was the predator stalking prey through the tall grass. She had no idea that he had read her file the day she applied. He knew about the FBI. He knew about her disgrace. He knew she thought he was a serial killer. He had hired her anyway, not to kill her, not to toy with her, but because he needed the best profiler the Bureau had ever produced, and she was the only one angry enough to help him find the real monster. "Let her in," Jisub whispered into the comms. "Kill the cameras." He pushed open the door and stepped into the dark. "Come on, Agent Cole," he murmured to the empty air. "Show me what you're really made of." 3 months into her undercover assignment, Sienna had documented 17 suspicious patterns in Jisub's behavior. She'd photographed the basement door, tracked the cleaning supply orders that included industrial-grade bleach in quantities no legitimate club would need, noted the way certain women looked at him with gratitude that felt wrong, uncomfortable, like they owed him something darker than employment. She was close. She could feel it. She just didn't realize that the Ice King sitting in the throne booth wasn't watching her because he wanted her. He was watching because he was waiting for her to make her move. And when she finally did, the game would begin in earnest. Welcome back, my fierce hearts and midnight dreamers. Before we dive in, make sure you're subscribed, hit that like button, and tell me where you're watching from. I love seeing our little dark romance family stretch across cities, countries, and time zones. Every click, every comment, every bit of love you leave here helps us keep unraveling these dangerous love stories and high-stakes betrayals together. So find your quiet place, dim the lights, and get ready. Let's begin. 3 months of surveillance had taught Sienna Cole that Jang Jisub was a creature of calculated patterns disguised as spontaneity. He never drank what she poured immediately. Always waited exactly 43 seconds, long enough to observe whether anyone else's behavior changed first. He positioned himself in the throne booth with sightlines to every entrance and exit. His security detail rotated in 8-hour shifts, but he personally chose who worked Thursday nights, and those guards were always the ones with military backgrounds, the ones comfortable with silence and secrets. Thursday nights. That was when everything changed. Every Thursday at 11:17. Never 11:15. Never 11:20, but precisely 11:17. Jisub would disappear into the restricted hallway that led to the sub-basement levels. No cameras in that corridor, no guards stationed at the door. Just him, a keycard, and whatever waited in the darkness below. He'd return 3 hours later, with the chemical smell of bleach clinging to his clothes like guilt. mixed with something else Sienna recognized from her years profiling crime scenes. Ozone, the electrical burn of fear, the metallic residue of violence contained. Tonight was Thursday. Sienna polished the same glass for the 4th time, her fingers steady despite the adrenaline singing through her veins. The stolen keycard burned against her skin where she'd tucked it into her vest's inner pocket, lifted from a guard who'd gotten distracted by a woman in a red dress. Sienna had bought the woman's drink anonymously, a small investment in her investigation. Everything was timing. Everything was strategy. The baseline shifted. Something darker, more industrial. And Sienna felt the atmospheric pressure in the room change before she saw him approaching. Gisub moved through crowds the way shadows moved through light. Inevitable, consuming, impossible to ignore even when you weren't looking directly at him. People stepped aside without conscious thought, responding to something primal that recognized apex predators. He sat at her bar. Not in the VIP section, not in the throne. Right in front of her, close enough that she could see the serpent tattoo on his neck pulsing with his heartbeat. Close enough to smell the expensive cologne that couldn't quite mask something darker underneath. Gunpowder residue, maybe. Or the particular musk of a man who'd learned to wear violence like a second skin. From his jacket, he produced a matte black credit card and slid it across the polished surface with 2 fingers, the gesture somehow both casual and deliberate. The card caught the violet light, absorbing it rather than reflecting it. "Tab is open," he said, voice low enough that she had to lean slightly forward to hear over the music. "Surprise me." Sienna picked up the card between her thumb and forefinger like it might contaminate her, then slid it back across the bar with the same measured precision he'd used. The card stopped exactly where it had started, a rejection delivered without words. "I don't take bribes, Mr. Zhang." Her voice remained neutral, professional, empty of the rage burning behind her sternum. "And I don't like surprises." Something flickered in those black-amber eyes. Amusement, perhaps, or recognition. He didn't retrieve the card. Instead, he leaned forward slightly, elbows on the bar, close enough now that she could count the faint scars on his knuckles, evidence of violence delivered personally rather than delegated. "Bribes require intention to corrupt," he said thoughtfully, as though discussing philosophy rather than criminal enterprise. "I'm simply investing in quality service. Loyalty should be rewarded, don't you think, Agent Cole?" Sienna's hand didn't tremble as she reached for the vodka bottle, but something cold slithered down her spine. He'd said her real name so softly that nobody else could have heard it, tucked it into the conversation like a knife slipped between ribs, precise and devastating. She poured Grey Goose into a shaker without measuring, muscle memory taking over while her mind raced. He knew, had always known. This entire time, she'd been the one in the cage thinking she was studying the predator. "Loyalty," Sienna repeated, adding elderflower liqueur and fresh lime juice with hands that remained admirably steady. "Requires trust. Justice requires only evidence." "Justice," Gisub smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Such a clean word for such a messy concept. "Tell me, do you believe in absolute justice, or the kind written by whoever controls the pen?" The shaker felt heavy in her hands as she added ice, sealing it, beginning the rhythmic shake that would chill and dilute the cocktail to perfection. The sound of ice against metal created its own percussion beneath the club's bass line. "I believe," she said carefully, straining the drink into a coupe glass, "that some people are monsters wearing human faces, and that those monsters should be stopped. Permanently." She slid the finished cocktail toward him. A French 75 variation. Beautiful and lethal. Bubbles rising through pale liquid like champagne-tinged poison. Gisub picked up the glass, but didn't drink. His fingers brushed the stem with the same careful attention she'd seen him use when checking weapons, when scanning crowds, when making decisions about who lived and who disappeared into the night. He held the glass up to the light, watching the bubbles ascend, then set it down untouched. "Monsters," he mused. "Yes. But which monsters are we discussing? The ones who kill? The ones who profit from death? Or the ones who convince themselves that their violence is righteous because it serves a greater good?" Sienna met his gaze directly, refusing to be the first to look away. His eyes held no warmth, but neither did they hold the emptiness she'd seen in true sociopaths during her profiling days. Instead, she saw calculation, assessment, and something else she couldn't quite name, a kind of weary knowledge that came from seeing too much of humanity's capacity for cruelty. All of them, she said quietly. Every single one deserves justice. Even if that justice is built on lies? He tilted his head slightly, the serpent on his neck seeming to shift with the movement. Even if the evidence you're so desperate to find has been manufactured by the real monster, and you're too blinded by your own righteousness to see it? Before Sienna could respond, Jisub stood, smoothing his jacket with a gesture that seemed almost weary. He left the untouched cocktail on the bar, the black credit card beside it. Then he leaned close enough that his breath ghosted against her ear, warm against the club's air-conditioned chill. "Thursdays," he whispered. "You've been watching. Tonight, you're planning to follow. So follow, Agent Cole. Go into the basement, see what I keep in the dark. But understand this. Some doors, once opened, can never be closed again. Some truths destroy the people who discover them." He pulled back, and Sienna saw something in his expression that looked disturbingly like concern, or perhaps warning, or perhaps the satisfaction of a man who'd just set a trap and watched his prey walk willingly into it. "Choose carefully," he added, then turned and walked away, disappearing into the crowd with the same liquid grace he'd arrived with. Sienna stood frozen behind the bar, her heart hammering against her ribs. The keycard in her vest felt like a brand against her skin. Every instinct she'd honed over years of profiling killers screamed that she'd just been played, manipulated, positioned exactly where Jisub wanted her. But she couldn't stop now. Couldn't turn back. Not when she was this close. At 11:17 exactly, Jisub disappeared into the restricted hallway. Sienna watched him go, counted to 60 while she finished serving a trio of finance bros their overpriced whiskey, then untied her apron and nodded to the backup bartender. "Bathroom break?" she said casually. Nobody questioned it. Nobody ever questioned the invisible people. The bartenders, the servers, the staff who kept the machinery of places like Nocturne running while the beautiful people played their games. The restricted hallway felt colder than the rest of the club, the bass reduced to a distant throb that vibrated through the walls rather than the air. Sienna pulled the keycard from her vest, hands steady now, mind clear with the sharp focus that came from crossing a point of no return. The reader beeped green. The lock disengaged with a heavy mechanical click. Sienna pushed open the door to the sub-basement and stepped into whatever truth Jang Jisub had been hiding in the dark. The stairs descended into silence so complete that Sienna could hear her own heartbeat, a war drum rhythm that seemed too loud, too exposed. Emergency lighting cast everything in sick green, turning shadows into something alive, predatory. The air tasted wrong. Chemically clean, the kind of sterile that came from industrial disinfectants working overtime to erase organic evidence. Bleach, ozone, and underneath, something copper-sweet that Sienna's hindbrain recognized as blood, even if the smell had been scrubbed away until only sense memory remained. Her hand instinctively moved to the small of her back, fingers brushing the concealed Glock 43 she'd sworn she wouldn't carry off duty anymore. She'd broken that promise her first day at Nocturne. Some promises weren't meant to survive contact with reality. The basement level opened into a corridor lined with industrial doors, each marked with numbers instead of names. Storage, archives, utilities. The kind of bland administrative labeling that made places invisible, unmemorable. The kind of labeling that made perfect hiding spots. Sienna moved with the silent grace that came from years of tactical training, each footfall placed deliberately on the balls of her feet, weight distributed to minimize sound. She passed the first 3 doors. The locks showed regular use, edges worn smooth, no dust accumulation. Active storage, then. Nothing worth investigating. The 4th door stood different. Newer lock, heavier construction, and a biometric scanner mounted beside the keypad, the kind that required both card access and fingerprint verification. That was the door. Sienna pressed her ear against the cold metal, listening. Nothing. No screams, no sounds of struggle, just the mechanical hum of HVAC systems and the distant thump of the club's bass filtering through layers of concrete and steel. She pulled back, studying the lock system with the careful attention of someone who'd spent 3 months studying FBI forensic locksmith manuals. The keycard might work, but the biometric scanner would need. The door clicked open from the inside. Sienna's hand went to her weapon, drawing in one smooth motion, barrel up, finger indexed along the frame rather than the trigger. Trained not to shoot first, trained to identify threats before engaging, trained by protocols she'd once believed in absolutely. The door swung wide. Inside, the room glowed with the pale blue light of multiple monitors, and sitting behind a curved desk that could have belonged to a Fortune 500 CEO, perfectly relaxed, perfectly still, sat Jang Ji-sub. He'd been waiting. "Agent Cole," he said, voice carrying that same unsettling calm he'd had at the bar. "Please, come in. Close the door. We have much to discuss, and I'd prefer we weren't interrupted." Sienna's weapon didn't waver, aimed center mass, textbook stance that had earned her commendations at Quantico. But her mind raced through calculations. Exits blocked, him positioned with clear sight lines, her weapon drawn but him showing no signs of alarm. Either he had backup she couldn't see, or he genuinely wasn't threatened by an armed federal agent in his private kill room. Neither option offered comfort. "Hands where I can see them," she ordered, voice clipped, professional. "Stand up slowly. Any sudden movements, and I will put you down." Ji-sub smiled, slow and predatory, and reached for something on his desk. Sienna's finger moved to the trigger. "I said, I heard you," he interrupted, still moving with that deliberate slowness. "But I think you'll want to hear this first." He pressed a button. Speakers built into the ceiling crackled to life, and Sienna heard her own voice fill the room. "Edwin, it's Cole. I'm in position at Nocturne. The target maintains his Thursday night pattern. I believe he's disposing of evidence in the sub-basement level. I'm going to attempt access tonight. Have tactical standing by. If I don't report in by 0200, breach and secure the site. We can't let this monster keep operating." The recording continued. Her full morning briefing with her handler, Agent Edwin, delivered from her apartment's bathroom with the shower running to mask the sound. Operational security she'd thought was unbreakable. 3 hours ago, private, secure, compromised. The blood in Sienna's veins turned to ice water. "Your apartment is wired," Ji-sub said conversationally, as though discussing weather rather than surveillance of a federal agent. "Has been since 2 weeks before you applied to work here. Your car, your laptop, your phone. Though I must commend your operational discipline there, you almost never use it for anything beyond surface communications." He paused, tilting his head. "Did you truly think I would allow someone into my organization without comprehensive background verification?" Sienna's weapon didn't lower, but her mind reeled through implications, recalculating everything she'd thought she understood. Every private moment, every planning session, every theory she'd developed about the meatpacking butcher. He'd heard all of it. "You bugged a federal agent," she said, voice cold enough to frost glass. "That's 20 years minimum. Federal surveillance charges carry the same penalties as conspiracy to murder?" Ji-sub interrupted smoothly. He stood now, movements fluid and unthreatening, hands visible and empty. "Tell me, Agent Cole, which one of us is actually guilty of the crimes you're so eager to prosecute?" He stepped around the desk, and Sienna tracked him with her weapon, maintaining distance, maintaining sight lines, maintaining the illusion of control, even as she felt it slipping through her fingers like smoke. "I know what you are," she said. "I've built the profile. The victims all disappeared near your club. The timeline matches your expansion into the meatpacking district. The methods show sophistication consistent with organized crime experience. You're the butcher." "No," Ji-sub said, voice dropping into something darker, more dangerous. "I'm not, but someone wants you to believe I am. Someone has very carefully constructed evidence pointing to me. Someone who benefits enormously from my destruction." He gestured to the monitors behind him. "I didn't bring you down here to kill you, Agent Cole. I brought you here because you are, by every metric that matters, the most talented criminal profiler the FBI has produced in a decade. You were forced out not because you were wrong, but because you were too right, and your conclusions threatened someone powerful enough to bury you. Sienna's jaw clenched. He'd done his research. The Portland case, the judge's son she'd profiled as a serial rapist. The career-ending procedural errors that had materialized the moment she'd gotten too close to the truth. The disgrace that still tasted like bile. "I don't need your assessment of my career," she bit out. "No," Jesub agreed. "You need my resources, because the real meatpacking butcher isn't operating randomly. He's targeting witnesses. Women who have testimony that could destroy a corruption network that reaches into the FBI, the NYPD, the district attorney's office, and the cartel that pays them all." He pressed another button. The monitors flickered to life, displaying photographs. Women's faces. The missing women from Sienna's case files. All of them alive, captured from security footage time-stamped within the last month. "These women aren't dead," Jesub said quietly. "They're hidden, protected. Because if the butcher finds them before they can testify, the entire case against his employers collapses, and I am the only thing standing between them and execution." Sienna's weapon finally lowered, not from trust, but from the cognitive dissonance of information that contradicted everything she'd built her investigation on. The profile, the evidence, the timeline, all of it pointed to Jesub, unless someone had carefully constructed it to point to him. "You're running an illegal witness protection program," she said slowly, piecing it together. "Using your criminal infrastructure to hide witnesses from other criminals. And from the corrupt law enforcement that serves those criminals," Jesub added. "Tell me, Agent Cole, how much do you trust your handler? How certain are you that Agent Edwin's primary loyalty is to justice, rather than to whoever pays him enough to subvert it?" Sienna's mind flashed to Edwin. 20-year veteran, spotless record, mentor who'd offered her this off-books assignment as redemption, as a chance to prove herself again. Edwin, who'd specifically assigned her to investigate Jesub. Edwin, who'd insisted she work alone, without bureau backup, to avoid contaminating the investigation. Edwin, who would be in perfect position to eliminate any witness Sienna discovered once she led him directly to them. "You're lying," she said, but her voice carried less conviction than she wanted. "Am I?" Jesub moved closer. Close enough now that she could see the faint scars along his jaw. Close enough that the serpent tattoo seemed to move with each pulse of his carotid artery. "Then explain why your handler insisted you work this case alone. Explain why every piece of evidence pointing to me appeared exactly when it needed to, exactly where you'd find it. Explain why the butcher's pattern changed the moment you arrived in New York. Why suddenly, after 3 years of clockwork murders, everything went quiet. Because I was getting close," Sienna wanted to say. "Because my presence disrupted his pattern." But another voice whispered darker possibilities. "Because you were the disruption he needed. Because you're not the hunter, you're the hound, being positioned to flush out the real prey." "I didn't hire you for your mixology skills, Agent Cole," Jesub said, voice dropping into something almost gentle. "I hired you because you're the best profiler the Bureau has disgraced. And I need the best. Because the man who's been framing me, the man who's actually killing these women, is someone inside law enforcement. Someone who knows FBI protocols. Someone who understands exactly how to manipulate a brilliant, angry, desperate agent into doing his killing for him." Sienna's weapon came back up, pointed at his chest, but her hand trembled now with something that wasn't fear. Rage. At herself for not seeing it. At him for being right. At the entire corrupt system that had chewed her up and was now using her as a weapon against the wrong target. "What do you want from me?" she asked. "What I've always wanted," Jesub said. "Your expertise. You came to arrest a monster, Agent Cole. I'm offering you the chance to catch one, the real one, before he kills again. Before he kills the women I'm protecting. Before he kills you." The silence that followed felt like standing at the edge of a cliff, feeling the ground crumble beneath her feet, knowing that the only way forward was to jump and pray there was something to catch her on the other side. Sienna holstered her weapon, not from trust, but from the brutal calculation that she was already falling, already compromised, already too deep to climb back out the way she'd come. "Show me," she said. "Show me the women. Show me your evidence. And if you're lying, if this is manipulation, I will put a bullet in your skull and sleep soundly afterward." Jisub nodded, something like respect flickering in those amber eyes. "I would expect nothing less." He turned to the wall, pressed his palm against what looked like solid concrete. A section slid open with a hydraulic hiss, revealing an elevator Sienna hadn't known existed. "The women are one level down," he said. "And Agent Cole? Once you see the truth, once you step into this world, there's no exit door. No, going back to the bureau, to your old life, to the comfortable belief that justice and law are the same thing. You stay forever, in the dark, with the monsters." Sienna stepped into the elevator beside him, feeling the walls close in, feeling the descent begin. "Then let's meet the devil," she said. The elevator descended with a whisper of hydraulics, smooth enough that Sienna felt the drop in her stomach rather than hearing it. The silence between them stretched like a wire pulled taut, humming with unspoken tension. Jisub stood with his hands clasped behind his back, perfectly still in the way that seasoned operators learned, conserving energy, maintaining awareness, ready to explode into violence at a microsecond's notice. Sienna watched him in her peripheral vision, her body angled to maintain distance and reaction time. Her hand didn't rest on her weapon, but it hovered close, muscle memory keeping the draw stroke ready. She'd stepped into his world, but that didn't mean she trusted him. Trust was a luxury federal agents didn't survive. The elevator shuddered to a stop. The doors opened onto darkness so complete it felt solid, textured. Then motion sensor lights flickered to life in sequence, illuminating a corridor that looked nothing like the industrial basement above. This space had been designed for long-term habitation. Recessed lighting, cream-colored walls, air that smelled clean, filtered, temperature-controlled. The hum of expensive HVAC systems creating positive pressure, preventing any outside contamination, and at the far end of the corridor, a heavy security door with another biometric scanner. Jisub moved forward without speaking. Sienna followed, her trained investigator's eye cataloging details. No exposed pipes, no concrete showing, soundproofing panels integrated into the ceiling. This wasn't a hastily constructed hiding place. This was a facility that had taken months to build, serious money to fund, sophisticated planning to execute. The security door required palm print, retinal scan, and a 12-digit code. Jisub completed the sequence without hesitation, and the door unlocked with a series of heavy mechanical clicks. What lay beyond made Sienna's breath catch. She'd expected a kill room, expected the steel tables and drain channels from her most violent case files, expected blood, fear, the physical evidence of torture and death. Instead, she found a space that looked like an upscale apartment complex, designed by someone who understood trauma-informed architecture. Soft lighting, natural wood tones, a common area with comfortable furniture arranged to encourage conversation but allow personal space. A kitchen area, where someone had left a coffee cup half empty on the counter. Bookshelves lined with actual books, not props. A television playing the Food Network on mute. And women, 4 of them in the common area, 2 more visible through an open doorway, playing cards at a table. Another reading on a couch, legs tucked beneath her, completely absorbed in whatever paperback she held. They all looked up when Jisub entered, and their faces transformed. Not with fear, not with the terrible resignation of captives who'd learned to perform gratitude for their captors, with genuine relief, recognition, the kind of response reserved for protectors, not predators. "Mr. Jang," one of them said, standing. She was young, early 20s maybe, with dark hair pulled back in a messy bun, and the kind of shadows under her eyes that came from sustained trauma. "Is everything all right?" "You're early. Everything's fine, Teresa," Jisub said, his voice shifting into something gentler, warmer than anything Sienna had heard from him above ground. "I brought someone I needed you to meet, someone who's been looking for you." All eyes turned to Sienna. Teresa's expression shuddered immediately, her body tensing, fingers curling into defensive fists. "Cop," she said flatly. "FBI," Sienna corrected automatically, then realized how little difference that made. I was investigating your disappearance." "My murder, you mean?" Teresa said. The other women had gone still, watching with the wariness of prey animals who'd learned that danger wore 100 different faces. "The butcher got me 6 months ago. That's what the news said. That's what everyone believes. Because believing I'm dead keeps me alive." Sienna's profiler instincts kicked in automatically, cataloging body language, word choice, the way the other women positioned themselves protectively around Teresa. "You're hiding from someone?" she said slowly. "Someone who wants to kill you before you can testify." "Deputy District Attorney Marcus Hartford," Teresa said, her voice hardening into something that could cut glass. "I was his assistant. That's what he called me. What I actually was? His procurement specialist. He liked them young, preferably underage, definitely trafficked. I didn't know. Not at first. By the time I figured it out, I'd already witnessed too much. Knew too much. Became too much of a liability." She gestured to the space around them. "Hartford tried to have me killed. Made it look like the meatpacking butcher got me. Just another random victim. But Mr. Jang found me first. Faked my death better than Hartford's killers could have. Brought me here. Kept me breathing while his lawyers built a case that might actually stick." Sienna turned slowly, looking at each woman in turn. They were all aged 18 to 25. All matched the victimology profile she'd constructed for the butcher, and all of them were very much alive, hidden in a bunker beneath a Mafia-owned nightclub, protected by the man she'd been sent to destroy. "How many?" she asked quietly. 8 currently in residence, Jesub answered. 3 more relocated to permanent identities after their testimony was secured. 2 we lost before I could extract them." His jaw tightened. "The real butcher found them first." Sienna's mind raced through implications, reconstructing her entire case from this new perspective. The evidence hadn't been wrong. It had been deliberately curated. The pattern hadn't been random. It had been engineered. And she'd been positioned as the unwitting instrument of a killer who wore a badge. "Agent Edwin," she said, the name tasting like poison. "My handler. He's the butcher." "Or working for him," Jesub confirmed. "I haven't been able to identify the actual killer yet. He's too careful, uses too many cutouts. But the corruption trail leads directly through your task force. Edwin specifically requested you for this assignment. Specifically positioned you to investigate me. And once you confirmed I was the butcher, you would have led him directly here, directly to the witnesses who can destroy his employers." The air in the room felt too thin suddenly. Not enough oxygen. Too much truth crushing down on Sienna's chest. She'd been played. Manipulated by someone who understood exactly what buttons to push. Her anger at the system. Her need to prove herself after Portland. Her absolute certainty that she could profile evil when she saw it. She'd been so busy looking for monsters that she'd missed the one standing right beside her, wearing a colleague's face. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" she demanded, turning on Jesub with the fury of someone who hated being wrong. "Why let me operate blind? Why the games?" "Because you wouldn't have believed me," he said simply. "You needed to see it. Needed to come to the conclusion yourself. Any information I provided would have been dismissed as manipulation, misdirection, the lies of a criminal trying to avoid justice." He stepped closer, close enough that she could see the exhaustion buried beneath his composed exterior. "You're one of the best profilers in the country, Agent Cole. But you have a blind spot the size of Manhattan when it comes to corruption inside law enforcement. You want to believe in the system, even after it betrayed you. You need to believe that justice and law mean the same thing. And you?" she shot back. "What do you believe in?" His smile held no warmth. "Survival, protection of the people who depend on me, and the understanding that sometimes the only thing standing between innocence and monsters is another monster with a more selective appetite." Teresa moved between them, her young face hard with experience that had aged her beyond her years. "He saved my life," she said to Sienna. "Saved all our lives. We know what he is. We know the things he's done. But we're alive because of him. and we'll be able to speak because of him. So whatever judgment you're preparing, whatever moral stance you're about to take, remember that we're the evidence. We're the proof that sometimes the worst people do the best things, and the best people do the worst. The hum of the air purifiers filled the silence. Somewhere in the living quarters, someone laughed at something on television. Normal sounds, life sounds, existing in a space carved out of darkness by someone who operated outside every law Sienna had sworn to uphold. She'd come here to catch a killer. Instead, she'd found a savior who tortured, murdered, and controlled an empire built on vice and violence. The cognitive dissonance made her teeth ache. "What do you need from me?" she asked finally. "Your expertise," Jesub said. "We have 8 women alive, 3 relocated, 2 dead. But the butcher's victim count is higher, at least 17 confirmed kills over 3 years. That means there are women we don't know about. Victims who didn't have testimony valuable enough to protect, who were killed simply because they existed in the wrong place at the wrong time. I need you to profile the real killer. Find his pattern beneath the pattern I've been blamed for. Identify him before he realizes we're hunting him. And then," Sienna's voice came out harder than she intended, "what happens when we find him?" Jesub's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes went cold, ancient, absolutely certain. "Then we remove him from the board. Permanently. Because people like the butcher don't stop. They don't rehabilitate. They don't face justice in courtrooms where lawyers argue about reasonable doubt and procedural technicalities. They face justice in dark alleys and shallow graves, delivered by people willing to get their hands dirty so others can sleep safely." It was an offer. A partnership. A descent into moral complexity that had no easy answers, no clear right choice. Only the terrible mathematics of harm reduction and lesser evils. Sienna thought about the women behind her, alive because a monster had protected them. Thought about Portland, about the judge's son who'd walked free because she'd been too idealistic to break the rules. Thought about Edwin, her mentor, who'd been using her as a weapon to eliminate the witnesses who threatened his paymasters. She thought about justice and law and the widening chasm between them. "I need full access to your intelligence," she said. "Complete files on all the victims, suspected and confirmed, crime scene photos if you have them, timeline reconstructions. And I need to report to Edwin that my investigation continues, that I'm still building the case against you." "Buying us time to work," Jesub nodded. "Done. And when this is over," Sienna continued, her voice dropping into something that felt like a door closing on her old life. "When we've caught the real butcher, stopped the killings, protected these women, I walk. I disappear. I don't work for you. I don't become part of your organization. We end this as enemies who temporarily aligned against a common threat." The lie tasted bitter on her tongue, because some part of her already knew the truth, that there was no walking away from this, no return to the clean moral certainty she'd once possessed. Some doors, once opened, didn't close. "Of course," Jesub agreed, and Sienna heard the same lie reflected back at her, the mutual understanding that they were both pretending there would be an after, when they both knew this collaboration would change them irrevocably. Teresa laughed softly, a sound without humor. "Welcome to the grave, Agent Cole. The nice thing about being dead? Nobody expects you to play by the rules anymore." Sienna turned back to the elevator, feeling the weight of 8 pairs of eyes on her back, feeling the weight of the choice she'd just made, feeling the last threads of her old life snapping like overstressed cables. "Let's go catch a killer," she said. 24 hours after descending into Jesub's underground sanctuary, Sienna had reconstructed the true pattern. The real meatpacking butcher killed on a 9-day cycle, always between 2 and 4 a.m., always in locations with minimal camera coverage. The victims showed evidence of prolonged psychological torture before death, not physical, but emotional. Their phones filled with messages from unknown numbers, their social media flooded with threats disguised as spam. He terrorized them first, isolated them, made them feel hunted before the actual kill. It was sophisticated, professional, and utterly inconsistent with the crime scenes that had been attributed to Jesub. Those scenes had been staged. bodies positioned post-mortem to suggest specific methods, evidence planted to create a false pattern. The real butcher's work was elegant, minimal, almost invisible. The staged scenes were theatrical, obvious, designed to be found. Someone wanted Gisub blamed. Someone who understood forensics well enough to construct convincing false evidence. Someone inside law enforcement. Sienna stared at the evidence board in Gisub's office, not the show office in the club, but his operational center in the basement. Walls covered in photographs, timelines, connection maps that looked like they'd been constructed by someone with JTTF experience. Her eyes burned from lack of sleep. Her head pounded from too much coffee and too many cognitive contradictions. "I need to report to Edwin," she said finally, checking her watch. "He's expecting an update. If I don't check in, he'll suspect something's wrong." Gisub looked up from his own analysis. He'd been reviewing security footage from the night of the last attributed kill. His attention absolute, unblinking. "What will you tell him?" "That I'm close. That I've confirmed you disappear into the basement on Thursdays. That I believe you're disposing of evidence there. I'll ask for more time before we move tactically." Sienna's jaw tightened. "And I'll pray that my handler, my mentor, the man who offered me redemption, isn't actually the serial killer who's been wearing my investigation like camouflage. Prayers are for people with faith in divine justice," Gisub said. "We deal in more practical protections." He stood, moved to a wall safe. Sienna hadn't noticed. It was hidden behind a false panel that matched the surrounding concrete perfectly. The safe required both combination and biometric verification. When it opened, Sienna glimpsed weaponry that made her FBI-issued Glock look like a child's toy. Gisub selected a vest, black, lightweight, flexible. "Military-grade Kevlar," he explained, crossing to her. "Rated for rifle rounds up to 7.62. Stab-resistant. Designed to be worn under clothing without obvious bulk." Sienna stared at the vest like it might bite her. "I'm meeting him in a public location. A coffee shop near the precinct. He's not going to shoot me in the middle of—" "Humor me," Gisub interrupted. His voice remained neutral, but something in his expression had gone hard, dangerous. "If I'm wrong about Edwin, you waste 30 minutes wearing an uncomfortable vest. If I'm right, and you don't wear it, you die. Mathematics, Agent Cole. Simple risk assessment." The vest was lighter than it looked, distributed weight across her shoulders and torso with the practiced engineering of people who understood that protection meant nothing if it prevented movement. Gisub's hands were clinical as he adjusted the straps, tightening the sides, checking the fit with the careful attention of someone who'd dressed for combat enough times to make it ritual. His fingers brushed against her collarbone while adjusting the neckline, and Sienna felt her breath catch. Not from attraction, she told herself, but from the intimacy of the gesture, the strange vulnerability of letting someone who should be her enemy protect her from another enemy who should be her ally. "Too tight?" he asked, voice softer than usual. "It's fine," she lied. Everything about this was too tight. The vest, the situation, the web of loyalties and betrayals that had become so tangled she could no longer tell which threads to trust. Gisub stepped back, studied her with those amber eyes that saw too much. "If Edwin makes any move that feels wrong, anything that trips your instincts, you run. Don't engage. Don't try to be heroic. Just run and come back here. Understand?" "I'm a federal agent meeting my handler for a case update," Sienna said, more sharply than necessary. "Not a soldier walking into an ambush. You're a federal agent who just discovered her handler might be a serial killer," Gisub corrected, "which makes you the most dangerous person in his world. The one piece of evidence that could unravel everything. If he suspects you know, even slightly, he will eliminate the threat. That's what professionals do." The weight of the vest suddenly felt heavier. Real. A physical manifestation of danger she'd been trying to rationalize away. The coffee shop was 2 blocks from the 14th precinct, neutral territory where cops and federal agents met for handoffs and briefings. Sienna arrived 15 minutes early, chose a table near the back exit. Another habit from her tactical training, always knowing the escape routes. Edwin arrived exactly on time, because punctuality was one of his defining characteristics. Reliability weaponized into trustworthiness. He looked the same as always. Gray hair cropped military short. Sharp suit that spoke of government salary but good tailoring. The kind face that had convinced 100 suspects to confess, 100 witnesses to trust him. He smiled when he saw her. Genuine warmth in his expression. "Cole," he said, sliding into the chair across from her. "You look exhausted. This case wearing on you." "Long nights," Sienna said, wrapping her hands around her coffee cup for something to do. Some way to keep them from trembling. "But I'm close, Edwin. Really close." His eyes sharpened with interest. "Close how?" "Gisub has a routine. Every Thursday night, he disappears into the restricted basement area for exactly 3 hours. No guards, no cameras. I managed to track his movement through adjacent security footage. He's carrying industrial-sized containers when he goes down, brings them back up empty. I think he's disposing of evidence, bodies maybe, or parts of them, using chemicals to accelerate decomposition." Edwin leaned forward, and Sienna saw something flicker in his expression, too fast to identify. There and gone like a shadow passing across his face. "You've been inside the basement?" "Not yet," she lied smoothly. "The access requires biometric verification. I can't bypass. But I've got a plan. One of his guards is compromised. Gambling debts, messy divorce. I can leverage him for access if you can authorize the operational budget." "How much?" Edwin asked. 50,000. Cash. Untraceable." Sienna watched his face carefully, using every micro-expression analysis technique she'd learned at Quantico. "I know it's a lot, but this could be the break we need. Get me into that basement, and I can confirm whether Gisub is our butcher." Edwin sat back, his expression thoughtful. Too thoughtful. Like a chess player studying a board, calculating 3 moves ahead. 50,000, he repeated slowly. "For a guard who might or might not give you access to a space that might or might not contain evidence." He shook his head. "I need more than might, Cole. I need certainty. The Bureau doesn't authorize that kind of operational expense on speculation." Something in his tone made Sienna's stomach clench. Not his words, but the way he said them. Too careful, too measured, like a man choosing each syllable with surgical precision. "You told me to get results," she said, hearing her voice come out harder than intended. "You said this was my redemption, my chance to prove Portland wasn't a fluke, that I could close cases. Now you're telling me you won't back me?" "I'm telling you I need proof before I can authorize expenditure," Edwin corrected. He leaned forward again, and this time Sienna saw something in his eyes that made every instinct scream. "But here's what I can do. Not here. Too many eyes. And I don't trust the perimeter. Meet me tonight, behind Nocturne. The service alley. 2 a.m. My ground, my terms. Bring me everything you've documented. Photos, surveillance logs, your case notes. I'll review it, see if there's enough to justify the budget request. If there is, we move fast. Coordinate with NYPD, set up tactical support, hit that basement before Gisub knows what's happening. The alley behind Nocturne. 2 a.m. No backup, no witnesses." The professional part of Sienna's brain, the part trained in threat assessment and predator behavior, started screaming. "Why not meet here?" she asked carefully. "Or at the field office?" "Because I need to see the site," Edwin said. "Need to understand the approach vectors, the exit routes, the tactical complications. You know I like to run ops personally." "Always have," he smiled, that trustworthy mentor smile that had earned him 20 years of commendations. "Unless you have a problem with that, it was a test, a trap." He was watching her face, her body language, looking for any sign that she suspected. Sienna forced herself to smile back. "No problem. 2 a.m. Service alley. I'll bring everything." "Good." Edwin stood, squeezed her shoulder in that paternal way he always did. "You're doing excellent work, Cole. Portland was a setback, but this case, this is your comeback. I always believed in you." He left before she could respond. Sienna sat frozen, Edwin's coffee cup still steaming on the table, her heart hammering against the Kevlar vest hidden beneath her shirt. He'd just ordered his own agent into a kill zone. Her handler. Her mentor. The man who'd promised her redemption. The meatpacking butcher wore a badge, and he knew she was getting too close. Sienna pulled out her phone with shaking hands, typed a message to the number Gisib had given her. He knows. Meeting tonight, 2 a.m., alley behind Nocturne. It's a kill. The response came back in seconds. Then we kill him first. The rain hit like bullets, cold and relentless, turning the alley behind Nocturne into a river of neon-reflected darkness. Sienna collapsed against the brick wall, her legs finally giving out, the adrenaline that had kept her moving draining away like water through her fingers. Her chest burned where Edwin's bullet had slammed into the Kevlar, the impact feeling like a sledgehammer to the sternum, cracking ribs, stealing breath, reminding her that survival and safety were different things entirely. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, the vibration sending fresh pain radiating through her torso. She pulled it out with shaking hands, rain immediately soaking the screen, and watched as the notification loaded. Breaking. FBI agent Sienna Cole wanted in connection with attempted murder of senior agent. Below the headline, her official bureau photo stared back at her. Younger, more naive, wearing the confident smile of someone who still believed the system worked. The article detailed how Agent Marcus Edwin had been found shot in an abandoned warehouse, how evidence pointed to his protégé, how a nationwide manhunt was underway for the disgraced agent who'd finally snapped after her Portland disgrace. Edwin had shot her point blank and framed her for his own attempted murder in a single, elegant move. The butcher wearing a badge had just made her the most wanted woman in New York City. Sienna let the phone fall from her nerveless fingers, clattering onto wet pavement. She had nowhere to go, no backup, no allies inside law enforcement. Every cop in the city would be hunting her, and most of them would shoot first because Edwin's corruption network ran deep, protected by people who benefited from keeping witnesses silent and investigations derailed. She thought about running, disappearing into the subway system, using the tactical evasion training she'd learned at Quantico to vanish into the urban sprawl. She could steal a car, drive until she hit the Canadian border, become someone new in a place where nobody cared about FBI fugitives. But that meant abandoning the women in Gisub's protection. That meant letting Edwin win. That meant accepting that justice was truly dead, and the only thing left was survival. Her body made the decision before her mind could catch up. She pushed herself upright, ribs screaming in protest, and stumbled toward the back entrance of Nocturne. Each step felt like walking through broken glass, her lungs refusing to expand fully, the Kevlar vest suddenly feeling like it was crushing her rather than protecting her. The service door was locked, but Sienna remembered watching the delivery drivers punch in the code 3 weeks ago during her surveillance. Muscle memory guided her fingers. 4792. The lock clicked open. Inside, the hallway glowed with emergency lighting, casting everything in sick green. The bass from the club above vibrated through the walls, but down here, the sound was muted, distant, like listening to a heartbeat through water. Sienna moved toward the private elevator, the one that led to Gisub's operational center, each breath tasting like copper and defeat. The elevator doors opened before she reached them. Gisub stood in the frame, perfectly still, amber eyes taking in every detail. Her soaked clothes, the way she held her ribs, the phone clutched in her white-knuckled grip, the news alert still glowing on the cracked screen. He didn't ask what happened, didn't demand explanations. He simply stepped forward and caught her as her knees finally buckled, lifting her with the easy strength of someone who'd carried broken things before. "I told you," he said quietly, voice vibrating through his chest where her cheek pressed against expensive fabric. "I told you the law wouldn't save you." Sienna wanted to argue, wanted to defend the system she'd spent her adult life serving. But the words died in her throat, drowned by the undeniable truth that the only person who'd tried to protect her was the monster she'd been sent to destroy. The elevator ascended, but not to the basement. Higher. To levels Sienna hadn't known existed. Past the club, past the offices, into a penthouse that occupied Nocturne's entire top floor. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the meatpacking district, The city spread below like a circuit board of light and shadow. The space was minimalist. Dark hardwood, leather furniture, art that looked expensive because it was subtle rather than showy. Jisub carried her to a bathroom that could have belonged in a luxury hotel, all marble and chrome and lighting designed to be flattering rather than harsh. He set her down on the edge of a massive soaking tub with the same careful precision he used for everything, then disappeared into an adjoining room. Sienna sat frozen, dripping rainwater onto pristine white tile, her mind unable to process the surreal shift from dying in an alley to sitting in a space that smelled like cedar and expensive cologne. She heard water running, cabinet doors opening and closing, the clink of glass against metal. Jisub returned with a first aid kit that looked military grade and a bottle of whiskey that never sat on shelves long enough to be priced honestly. He set both on the marble counter, then knelt in front of her, the Korean Mafia boss who commanded an empire, kneeling on bathroom tile to tend to the woman who'd tried to end him. "Vest off," he ordered, voice gentle but leaving no room for argument. Sienna's hands trembled as she reached for the straps, pain flaring with each movement. Jisub's fingers replaced hers, unfastening the Kevlar with practiced efficiency, peeling it away from her body like removing armor from a wounded soldier. Beneath, her white shirt was soaked through, clinging to skin that was already darkening with bruises. "Shirt too," Jisub said. "I can do it," Sienna protested weakly. His eyes met hers, and she saw something in them that made her breath catch. Not desire, not pity, but recognition. The look of one survivor acknowledging another. "You saved my witnesses. You chose truth over law. Let me return the favor. Let me save you." Her fingers moved to the buttons, but they wouldn't cooperate, shock and pain making them clumsy. Jisub waited exactly 3 seconds, then took over, unfastening each button with the same careful attention he'd used for the vest straps. When he peeled the fabric away from her shoulders, Sienna heard his sharp intake of breath. The bruise bloomed across her sternum in violent purple and black, the perfect circular impact mark where Edwin's bullet had hit the Kevlar. Her ribs showed additional darkening where the force had cracked bone, creating a constellation of damage that mapped her near death like a brutal tattoo. Jisub's jaw tightened, the muscle jumping beneath his skin. The serpent on his neck seemed to writhe with his barely contained fury. "Edwin did this. It wasn't a question." Sienna nodded anyway. "And then he framed you for it." Jisub's voice dropped into something colder than the rain outside, harder than the marble they sat on. Elegant, efficient, the mark of someone who's cleaned up mistakes before. He reached for the whiskey, poured a generous measure into a glass, then handed it to her. "Drink. It'll help with the shock." Sienna took the glass, her fingers brushing his, sending electricity up her arm that had nothing to do with injury and everything to do with the dangerous intimacy of this moment. Half naked, vulnerable, alone with a man who could kill her as easily as he was healing her. The whiskey burned going down, smooth heat that spread through her chest, warming her from the inside out. Jisub opened the first aid kit, selected antiseptic wipes and bruise cream with the careful consideration of someone who'd treated combat wounds before. His hands were gentle as they cleaned the scrapes on her shoulders where she'd hit the pavement. Gentle as they applied cream to the massive bruise, fingertips barely touching, reading her pain response through the tension in her muscles. He worked in silence, focused entirely on the task, but Sienna felt the weight of everything unspoken between them. The lies she'd believed, the trust she'd broken, the partnership they'd built in the shadow of betrayal. "Why did you make me wear the vest?" she asked finally, voice rough from screaming and rain and swallowed tears. "You knew Edwin would try to kill me." Jisub's hands stilled, resting against her ribs with careful pressure. "I've been tracking Edwin for 6 months. Ever since the second witness disappeared and I realized someone inside law enforcement was feeding the butcher information. Edwin's financial records show deposits that coincide with every kill. His phone pings place him near 3 of the murder sites. And his psychological profile." Jisub's eyes met hers. "He's a cleaner. Someone who eliminates problems for people with enough money to afford permanent solutions. And you didn't tell me because I wouldn't have believed you," Sienna finished. "Because you wanted to believe in the system." Jisub corrected. "Needed to believe it. even after it betrayed you in Portland. You would have gone to Edwin anyway, convinced you could appeal to his better nature, his oath, his duty, and he would have killed you in that alley, and I would have lost the best profiler I've ever worked with." He stood, disposing of the bloody wipes with mechanical efficiency, then returned with a soft black t-shirt that probably belonged to him, too large for her frame, smelling like cedar and danger. Arms up, Sienna raised her arms as much as her injured ribs would allow. Jesub slipped the shirt over her head with the same careful precision, then helped guide her arms through, his fingers brushing against her skin in ways that felt more intimate than any kiss she'd ever experienced. "So what now?" she asked, pulling the shirt down, drowning in fabric that felt like being wrapped in his protection. "I'm wanted for attempted murder of a federal agent. Every cop in the city is looking for me. I can't exactly walk back into the bureau and explain that my handler is actually the serial killer we've been hunting." Jesub's expression shifted into something that looked like satisfaction. Dark, dangerous, absolute. Now you stop pretending you're still one of them. You're not FBI anymore, Sienna. You're not bound by their rules, their procedures, their suffocating morality that lets men like Edwin operate because the paperwork matters more than justice. He leaned close enough that she could see flecks of gold in those amber eyes. "You're mine now, under my protection, part of my organization, and I take care of what's mine." The possessiveness should have offended her, should have triggered her independent streak, her refusal to be claimed or controlled. Instead, it felt like relief. The terrible freedom of having no more choices to make, no more lines to walk between law and justice. "Then teach me," Sienna said, meeting his gaze with the same intensity he gave her. "Teach me how to survive outside the law. Teach me how to be the monster they've already decided I am." Something flickered in Jesub's expression. Approval, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit who'd finally stopped fighting their true nature. He extended his hand, formal despite everything, offering a partnership sealed in blood and betrayal rather than badges and oaths. "Welcome to the grave, Agent Cole," he said. "The nice thing about being dead? Nobody expects you to play by the rules anymore." Sienna took his hand, feeling calluses earned from violence, warmth that contradicted everything she'd believed about cold-blooded killers, strength that could break her or hold her together. "I'm not an agent anymore. Just Sienna. Just yours." The word tasted dangerous on her tongue. Liberating. Like stepping off a cliff and discovering she could fly. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. NYPD hunting their fugitive, searching for a woman who no longer existed. Inside Jesub's penthouse, Sienna Cole died her final death, and something sharper, more dangerous, was born in her place. 48 hours after Edwin's betrayal, Nocturne became a fortress under siege. NYPD cruisers blocked both ends of the street, their light bars painting the meatpacking district in alternating red and blue. SWAT vans idled with engines running, tactical teams checking weapons with the mechanical efficiency of soldiers preparing for war. News helicopters circled overhead, their spotlights cutting through the night, broadcasting live footage of what the media was calling the meatpacking standoff. Inside the club, the music had stopped. The beautiful people had been evacuated hours ago, leaving only Jesub's core security team, 12 men who'd served with him since his early days, who understood that loyalty meant standing between your boss and bullets when the situation demanded it. They'd converted the main floor into a defensive position, overturning tables for cover, positioning themselves with sightlines to every entrance. Sienna watched from the second-floor balcony, her ribs still screaming with each breath but her mind crystalline with tactical analysis. She counted 23 SWAT officers in visible positions, which meant at least another dozen hidden in surrounding buildings, sniper teams positioned on rooftops with clear shots through Nocturne's floor-to-ceiling windows. They weren't here to arrest anyone. They were here to eliminate the problem. "They're going to storm the building," she said quietly, not turning from the window. "Edwin's convinced them I'm holding hostages, that I've gone full Stockholm Syndrome and turned against the Bureau. He'll use it as justification for a kill order." Jesub stood beside her, perfectly still, watching the same tactical deployment with the trained eye of someone who'd survived worse sieges. Edwin doesn't want you arrested. He wants you dead, along with everyone who might corroborate your story. He'll order them to shoot on sight, claim we opened fire first, and by the time Internal Affairs investigates, the only evidence will be our bodies and his version of events. Below, one of G-Sub's guards called up from the main floor. "Boss, they're demanding Sienna Cole. They're giving us 10 minutes to send her out, or they breach." The air in Nocturne felt too thin suddenly, pressure building like before a thunderstorm. Sienna's hand moved instinctively to the Glock at her hip, no longer her FBI-issued weapon, but one of G-Sub's custom pieces. Lighter, faster, modified for someone with her grip strength and shooting style. In 48 hours, he'd retrained her reflexes, rebuilt her from federal agent to something sharper, more dangerous. "There's a tunnel," G-Sub said, his voice carefully neutral. "Service corridor that connects to the old subway line beneath the building. It's been sealed off for decades, but I had it renovated for exactly this contingency. It exits 3 blocks away, in the basement of a commercial property I own. You can be in New Jersey before they realize you're gone." Sienna turned to face him, studying the expression he was trying to keep controlled. The slight tightness around his eyes, the muscle jumping in his jaw beneath the serpent tattoo. The careful way he held his shoulders like a man preparing to lose something valuable. "You're sending me away," she said. "I'm giving you an exit," he corrected. "You stay here, you die. Edwin will make sure of it. You run, you survive. You disappear into whatever new identity you build. Somewhere far from New York, far from me, far from the mess I've dragged you into." The megaphone outside crackled to life. Edwin's voice amplified and distorted but unmistakable. "Sienna Cole, you have 8 minutes to exit the building with your hands visible. If you do not comply, we will use lethal force to extract you. Anyone who interferes will be considered hostile." "They'll destroy everything you've built," Sienna said, ignoring the ultimatum. "Nocturne, your organization. The women downstairs who depend on you for protection. Edwin doesn't just want me dead. He wants your entire operation exposed, dismantled, used as evidence that the FBI successfully took down a major criminal enterprise. You'll lose everything." "I've lost everything before," G-Sub said, and for the first time since she'd met him, she heard something raw in his voice, unguarded. "I've rebuilt from nothing twice already. I can do it again. But I can't rebuild you, Sienna. You die tonight, that's permanent. That's a loss I won't accept." He pulled a keycard from his jacket, pressed it into her palm with fingers that trembled almost imperceptibly. "The tunnel entrance is behind the wine storage in the sub-basement. This card opens the access door. There's a duffel bag waiting with cash, 3 passports under different names, and a burner phone with a single contact. A forger in Montreal who owes me favors. Use him. Disappear. Live." Sienna looked down at the keycard, feeling its weight like an anchor, like a door closing on everything she'd become in the past 48 hours. She thought about running. About Montreal, or Vancouver, or some small town where nobody cared about FBI fugitives and disgraced profilers. She thought about surviving. But surviving meant abandoning the women Edwin would kill the moment she was gone. Meant letting him win. Meant accepting that the only justice available was the kind you ran from rather than fought for. "No," she said, closing her fist around the keycard. "I'm not running." G-Sub's expression shifted into something desperate, controlled fury barely contained. "This isn't bravery, it's suicide. You can't fight the entire NYPD. I'm not fighting them," Sienna interrupted. "You are. Or rather, you're going to let them think they've won, while I do what I do best, profile the real threat and eliminate it at the source." She moved past him, heading for the stairs, her mind already 3 steps ahead, calculating angles and probabilities and the kind of desperate mathematics that separated survivors from corpses. G-Sub caught her arm, gentle but firm, spinning her back to face him. "If you stay, you die," he said, and the rawness in his voice made her chest tighten in ways that had nothing to do with cracked ribs. "I can protect my men. I can rebuild my empire. But I cannot." He stopped, jaw working like the words were being physically torn from him. I cannot watch you die believing I could have prevented it. The megaphone crackled again. 6 minutes, Cole. Send her out, Jang, or we're coming in. Sienna reached up, her hand cupping his jaw where the serpent tattoo pulsed with his racing heartbeat. This close, she could see the exhaustion he hid. The weight of protecting too many people, carrying too many secrets, surviving in a world that demanded constant vigilance. This close, he looked almost human. You've spent 6 months protecting women everyone else declared dead, she said quietly. You've built something good inside, something terrible. You've saved lives that the system abandoned. So let me save yours. Let me be the weapon you've been training me to be. His hand covered hers, pressing her palm against the steady rhythm of his pulse. And if it goes wrong? If Edwin kills you anyway? Then you burn his world down, Sienna said, and felt the words settle into truth, into promise, into the kind of partnership that couldn't be broken by death because it had already been forged in it. You find every person who helped him, every corrupt cop, every bought judge, every cartel connection, and you dismantle them piece by piece until there's nothing left but ash and regret. Something shifted in Jisub's expression, the careful control cracking, revealing the predator beneath the civilized veneer. He leaned forward, and for one suspended moment, Sienna thought he might kiss her, claim her mouth with the same possessive intensity he claimed everything else he valued. Instead, he pressed his forehead to hers, breathing the same air, close enough that their heartbeats synchronized. If you die, he whispered, I will make Edwin beg for death before I grant it. I will make him understand that mercy is a gift I no longer possess. Good, Sienna said. Now go give them what they want. The confusion that flickered across his face would have been almost funny under different circumstances. What? They want a show, Sienna explained, already moving toward the back stairs, toward the hidden positions she'd scouted during her time underground. They want the Mafia boss broken, submissive, the girl handed over like a peace offering. So give it to them, walk out those doors with your hands up, make Edwin think he's won. And while every cop is focused on you, I'll do what I do best, hunt the hunter. You want me to surrender, Jisub said slowly, processing the tactical implications. Let them arrest me, create a distraction. I want you to be the king who knows when to kneel, Sienna corrected. Because kneeling isn't defeat when you're buying time for your queen to checkmate. The megaphone. 3 minutes, Cole. Final warning. Jisub's guards were watching them now, tension radiating off them like heat, waiting for orders that would determine whether they lived or died in the next 10 minutes. Jisub looked at each of them in turn, then back at Sienna, his expression settling into the cold calculation that had kept him alive through gang wars and federal investigations, and every other threat that had tried to bury him. Stand down, he ordered his men. Weapons on the floor, hands visible. When they breach, you comply. No resistance, no heroics. You go where they take you. You keep your mouths shut, and you wait for extraction. The guards exchanged glances but obeyed, setting down their weapons with the reluctance of soldiers being ordered to surrender. They trusted Jisub absolutely, trusted that surrender was strategy rather than defeat. Jisub turned back to Sienna, pulled something from his jacket, his signet ring, heavy platinum with the Geoman Syndicate mark etched into its surface. He pressed it into her hand, closing her fingers around it with both of his. This ring has opened doors and ended arguments across 3 continents. Wear it, and my people will recognize you, help you, die for you if necessary. It's not a gift. It's a claim. You wear my mark now, Sienna. You operate under my protection and my authority. The weight of the ring felt immense, heavy with implications and promises and the kind of commitment that couldn't be undone. Sienna slipped it onto her right hand, where it sat too large, sliding against her knuckle, a physical reminder of the man who'd given it. Don't die, she said. Don't make me avenge you, he countered. Then he walked toward the main entrance with the fluid grace of a man approaching his execution. Perfectly calm, perfectly controlled. He pushed open the doors himself, stepping into the spotlight, glare and laser sights and the orchestrated chaos of law enforcement preparing to kill in the name of justice. Sienna watched from the shadows as Jisub raised his hands, slow and visible, and completely unthreatening. She watched as SWAT teams swarmed forward, forcing him to his knees on the wet asphalt, the rain turning his expensive suit dark, plastering his hair to his skull. She watched as they zip-tied his wrists with enough force to cut circulation, saw him wince but not resist, accepting the violence with the same cold patience he accepted everything else. She watched as the Korean Mafia boss who commanded an empire knelt in the street with rifle lasers painting his chest, surrendering his freedom to buy her time. And she felt something shift inside her chest. Not love, not yet, but recognition of a bond forged in fire, sealed in sacrifice, the kind of partnership that could either save them both or drag them both to hell. Edwin emerged from one of the SWAT vans, pristine despite the rain, his arm in a sling from the wound he'd given himself to sell the frame. He walked up to Jisub with the satisfied smile of a hunter claiming his prize. "Where's Cole?" Edwin demanded, loud enough for the cameras to catch. Jisub raised his head, rain streaming down his face, and smiled. "Cold, dangerous, absolutely certain. You'll find out soon enough." Edwin's expression darkened. He pulled his service weapon, aimed it at Jisub's head with the casual violence of someone who'd done this before. "Last chance. Where is she?" "Dead," Jisub lied smoothly. "Your bullet did its job, Edwin. She bled out in an alley 3 blocks from here. I disposed of the body myself. So congratulations. You finally managed to kill someone without fucking up the forensics." The fury that crossed Edwin's face was beautiful to watch. He'd wanted Sienna alive, wanted to tie up the loose end himself, control the narrative completely. Finding out she was already dead, allegedly, robbed him of that satisfaction. But Edwin was professional enough to adapt. He lowered his weapon, gestured to the SWAT team. "Take him, federal custody, and tear this place apart. I want every piece of evidence documented, every illegal weapon cataloged, every one of his operations exposed." They dragged Jisub toward a waiting van, his expensive shoes scraping against wet asphalt, his head held high despite the zip ties and the rifles, and the absolute certainty of life imprisonment. He didn't look back, didn't try to signal or communicate or do anything that might give Sienna away. He simply disappeared into the van, swallowed by the justice system he'd spent his career evading, sacrificing his freedom for a woman who'd tried to destroy him less than a week ago. Sienna watched from the second-floor window, one hand pressed against the glass, the other clenched around the signet ring that now marked her as his. She watched the van pull away, its taillights disappearing into the rain and chaos, carrying the man who'd saved her life twice now. Then she turned from the window and became the weapon he'd trained her to be. Because Edwin had just made his final mistake, he'd assumed the most dangerous predator was behind bars, when she was actually loose in the shadows, hunting. The FBI had a protocol for transporting high-value targets. Armored convoy, 3 vehicles, rotating routes to prevent ambush. Sienna had studied these procedures at Quantico, memorized them during her tactical training, learned them so thoroughly she could exploit them in her sleep. Edwin would be personally overseeing Jisub's transport to the federal holding facility in Brooklyn. He'd want to maintain control, ensure no complications arose during the 40-minute drive across the city. Standard protocol dictated transport during low-traffic hours, between 2 and 4 a.m., when the streets were clearest and the risk of civilian casualties minimized, which meant Sienna had exactly 6 hours to prepare. She moved through Nocturne's sub-basement with purpose, the ring on her finger catching emergency lights as she descended into the levels that housed Jisub's real arsenal. The first room held the weapons legal enough to survive casual inspection. Handguns, tactical shotguns, the kind of hardware any security-conscious nightclub owner might possess. The second room required biometric verification and contained the illegal imports, modified assault rifles, body armor rated for military engagement, the tools of someone who understood war. The third room, the one hidden behind a false wall, held specialized equipment that made Sienna's trained tactical mind sing with possibilities. She selected a Heckler & Koch MP7, compact enough to conceal but powerful enough to punch through vehicle armor, added 3 40-round magazines. A tactical vest, designed for maximum mobility rather than maximum protection. She needed speed more than coverage. Flashbang grenades. a breaching charge, and the piece of equipment that would make the entire plan possible. A commercial snowplow truck that G-Sub's organization had acquired for reasons she hadn't questioned when she'd first seen it during her reconnaissance. Now she understood. Sometimes the best weapons were the ones nobody suspected. Teresa found her in the armory, the young woman who'd been the first witness, the one whose testimony would bring down a deputy district attorney and expose an entire corruption network. She stood in the doorway, arms crossed, studying Sienna with eyes that had learned to read people through survival rather than training. "You're going after him," Teresa said. Not a question. "Yes," Sienna confirmed, checking the MP7's action with mechanical efficiency. "Edwin will have the entire convoy armed. SWAT escort, maybe 30 or 40 law enforcement personnel, all of them following orders to protect a federal prisoner." "I know. You'll have to kill cops," Teresa said quietly. "Good cops, probably. People just doing their jobs, following Edwin's orders because they don't know he's the monster." Sienna's hands stilled on the weapon. This was the line, the one she'd sworn she'd never cross, the boundary that separated law enforcement from criminals, justice from murder. Every person she killed tonight would be someone wearing a badge, following orders, believing they were protecting the system. She thought about Edwin's bullet hitting her chest. Thought about G-Sub kneeling in the rain, sacrificing his freedom for her. Thought about the women living in the basement who would die the moment Edwin eliminated the threat they represented. "Sometimes," Sienna said slowly, "the people just following orders are the ones enabling evil. They don't pull the trigger themselves, but they load the gun, aim it where their superiors tell them, and convince themselves that obedience absolves them of responsibility." She looked up, meeting Teresa's gaze directly. "I'm done absolving them. I'm done pretending that following evil orders is somehow more moral than stopping them." Teresa nodded, something like approval in her expression. She crossed to a cabinet Sienna hadn't noticed, pulled out a case that opened to reveal communication equipment, earpieces, tactical radios, frequencies already programmed. "Mr. Jang had these ready. He suspected you might do something stupid and brave. Said if you were going to get yourself killed, you should at least have proper comms." The equipment was military grade, encrypted, impossible to intercept without specialized hardware the NYPD wouldn't have access to. Sienna fitted the earpiece, tested the connection, and heard Teresa's voice come through crystal clear despite the distance. "We'll be your overwatch," Teresa said, both through the earpiece and in person. "All 8 of us. We've been trained for this, Mr. Jang didn't keep us locked in a basement for 6 months without teaching us how to fight. We'll monitor police frequencies, give you real-time updates on convoy position, warn you if tactical teams deploy to intercept." Sienna felt something crack in her chest. Not pain, but the terrible relief of not being alone, of having allies who understood that survival sometimes required violence, that protection sometimes demanded sacrifice. "Thank you," she said. "Don't thank us," Teresa replied, her young face hardening into something ancient, scarred by knowledge no one should possess at 22. "Just make Edwin suffer. Make him understand what he took from us. Make him beg." The snowplow truck was parked in a commercial garage 3 blocks from Nocturne, registered to one of G-Sub's shell companies, maintained for exactly this kind of contingency. Sienna had studied its capabilities during her reconnaissance. 15 tons of reinforced steel, a plow blade designed to clear city streets during blizzards, an engine powerful enough to push through virtually anything short of a concrete barricade. She climbed into the cab, familiarized herself with the controls, then positioned herself on the Brooklyn Bridge's Manhattan-Jintside approach. She'd driven heavy transport during an undercover stint with a smuggling ring in Detroit. The mechanics were clumsy, but she knew how to use the weight. Teresa's voice came through the earpiece, calm and professional. Convoy just departed from Nocturne. 3 vehicles, lead car, armored transport, chase car, SWAT escort on motorcycles. They're taking the FDR to the Brooklyn Bridge. ETA to your position. 12 minutes. Sienna pulled the snowplow into position, angling it across 2 lanes, engine idling, lights off. From this position, She had a clear view of the bridge's approach but remained invisible to the convoy until they were too close to stop. The rain had intensified, turning the night into a watercolor painting where lights blurred and distances became uncertain. Sienna's hands rested on the steering wheel, steady despite the adrenaline singing through her system. She thought about the last time she'd worn a badge, believed in the system, convinced herself that justice and law were synonymous. That woman had died in an alley with Edwin's bullet in her chest. What rose from that death was something sharper, more honest about the world's true nature, that evil wore uniforms as often as it wore masks, that morality was a luxury afforded only to people who'd never had to choose between survival and righteousness. Teresa's voice. Convoy entering the bridge. 8 minutes. Sienna checked the MP7 one final time. 40 rounds. Select fire. Capable of putting rounds on target at 300 meters if necessary. She'd been trained to shoot center mass, to neutralize threats efficiently and humanely. Tonight, she'd use that training to kill people who thought they were heroes. The moral weight should have crushed her. Instead, it felt like the shedding of chains she'd worn so long she'd forgotten they weren't part of her skin. 5 minutes. The bridge stretched before her, suspended cables catching rain and light, creating an alien landscape of industrial beauty. Somewhere in the convoy approaching, Gisub sat in restraints, calm despite everything, trusting that the weapon he'd forged from a broken FBI agent would function exactly as designed. 3 minutes. They're accelerating. Edwin's in the lead vehicle. Sienna's finger moved to the ignition, ready to start the snowplow's massive engine. She thought about Portland, about the judge's son who'd walked free because she'd played by rules that protected predators. Thought about the women living in basements because the law couldn't save them. Thought about every compromise she'd made, every evil she'd documented but couldn't stop because the system demanded evidence and procedure, and the kind of certainty that let monsters operate in the gaps. 90 seconds. She started the engine. The snowplow roared to life, 15 tons of purpose-built destruction ready to be aimed at the precise point where law and justice diverged. 60 seconds. Sienna, they're coming in hot. You're going to get one shot at this. If you miss the transport vehicle, if the timing's off, they'll box you in and put you down before you can reposition. I won't miss, Sienna said, and felt the truth of it settle into her bones. She was a profiler, trained to predict behavior, calculate probability, understand exactly how people would react under pressure. She'd studied the convoy's formation, knew which driver would brake first, which would try to evade, which would freeze in the moment before impact. She'd built the profile. Now she'd execute it. 30 seconds. Visual confirmed. 3 vehicles, just like we thought. Edwin's in the lead, Gisub's in the middle, chase car bringing up the rear. Sienna's hands tightened on the wheel. The first rule of tactical driving: commit to the action completely. Hesitation got you killed. Doubt created mistakes. You picked your moment, you executed, and you dealt with the consequences after. 15 seconds. The convoy's headlights appeared through the rain, refracted and distorted, approaching at 60 miles per hour on a bridge where the speed limit was 40. Edwin was in a hurry, confident that the convoy's firepower would deter any intervention. He'd profiled the wrong target. 10, 9, 8. Sienna released the brake, simultaneously flooring the accelerator. The snowplow lurched forward with the ponderous momentum of an avalanche, building speed across the rain-slick pavement. 7, 6, 5. The lead vehicle's driver saw her. She watched his headlights swerve right, trying to avoid collision, exactly as she'd predicted he would. Civilian drivers always tried to evade. It was instinct, trained reflex, the belief that accidents could be avoided through fast reactions. But Sienna wasn't trying to avoid an accident. She was engineering one. 4, 3, 2. The snowplow's blade caught the lead vehicle's passenger side. The impact transmitted through the steering wheel like an earthquake. 15 tons of steel, meeting 2 tons of aluminum, and losing the battle. The lead car spun, caught the guardrail, flipped in a geometric spiral that would have been beautiful if it weren't so lethal. 1. Impact. Impact. The armored transport tried to brake, tried to stop, but physics didn't care about intentions. The vehicle's anti-lock brakes locked anyway on the wet pavement, sending it sliding directly into the snowplow's blade. The collision sounded like the end of the world. Metal screaming, glass exploding, the transport vehicle rolling onto its side with the terrible grace of a dying animal. The chase car managed to stop, barely, its driver demonstrating better reflexes than his colleagues. But stopping meant becoming stationary, and stationary targets were the easiest to eliminate. Sienna abandoned the snowplow, MP7 already in her hands, moving with the fluid efficiency of someone who'd finally stopped fighting her training and started embracing it. The chase car's doors opened, SWAT officers emerging with weapons raised, shouting commands that meant nothing to someone who'd already decided that survival trumped compliance. She fired in controlled bursts, 3 rounds each, center mass, the shots landing exactly where her training said they would. The officers went down, body armor stopping the rounds, but not the kinetic force that cracked ribs and stopped hearts through hydrostatic shock alone. Non-lethal, probably. Sienna told herself it was non-lethal even as she moved past their fallen bodies toward the overturned transport vehicle. Inside, Jisub hung upside down in his restraints, blood running down his face from a gash above his eyebrow, amber eyes tracking her movement with the calm focus of someone who'd survived worse crashes. Their gazes met through the shattered window, and she saw no judgment in his expression, only recognition of a choice made, a line crossed, a transformation completed. The transport's rear doors had buckled but held. Sienna attached the breaching charge with shaking hands, set the timer for 5 seconds, then took cover behind the snowplow's massive tire. The explosion was surgical, shaped charge designed to destroy locks while minimizing internal damage. The doors blew outward in a controlled burst, smoke and debris creating momentary cover. Sienna moved through the smoke, MP7 leading, and found Edwin climbing from the wreckage of the lead vehicle. His arm hung at the wrong angle, his face lacerated by glass, but his weapon was still in his good hand, already tracking toward her. "Cole," he rasped, voice twisted by pain and fury. "You stupid, idealistic, self-righteous." She shot him in the shoulder, the round punching through flesh and bone, spinning him around. He fell against the wrecked vehicle, weapon clattering across pavement. "I was going to offer you a deal," Edwin continued, somehow still talking despite the damage, the adrenaline keeping him conscious through what should have been shock. "The cartel pays well, better than the Bureau ever did. You could have had money, protection, a real career instead of this." He gestured at the carnage, the overturned vehicles, the bodies of officers she'd neutralized, this pointless crusade. Sienna walked closer, MP7 aimed center mass, finger on the trigger. Up close, she could see the fear beneath Edwin's fury, the sudden understanding that the student had surpassed the teacher in all the worst ways. "You shot me," she said quietly. "Point blank. Framed me for your crimes. Used my idealism as a weapon to eliminate witnesses who trusted the system you corrupted." "I was following orders," Edwin said, falling back on the oldest defense, the one that had justified atrocities throughout human history. "The cartel wanted them dead. I provided a service. That's how the world works, Cole. People like me understand that morality is a luxury we can't afford." "No," Sienna corrected. "People like you hide behind just following orders because you're too cowardly to admit you chose evil for profit. You had 1,000 chances to be better. You chose this." She heard the sirens in the distance. More units responding to the crash. The assault. The absolute destruction of standard transport protocol. Time was running out. She needed to get Jisub and disappear before tactical response teams arrived with proper equipment and the kind of firepower that even her desperate rage couldn't overcome. Edwin must have seen the calculation in her eyes. "You can't run forever," he said. "You kill me, you're wanted for murdering a federal agent. Every cop in the country will hunt you. You'll die in a shootout somewhere, forgotten and reviled, your name synonymous with betrayal." "Maybe," Sienna agreed. She pulled the trigger. The round took Edwin's center mass, punching through lung tissue, nicking his heart, creating the kind of catastrophic internal damage that modern medicine might save if paramedics arrived in the next 90 seconds. They wouldn't. Sienna watched him fall, watched the light dim in his eyes, watched 20 years of corruption and murder end on a rain-soaked bridge in the middle of the night. She felt nothing, no satisfaction, no guilt, just the cold certainty that she'd removed a threat, permanently, using the same mathematics Edwin had employed against his victims. She'd become the monster. The question was whether monsters could still be heroes, or if that kind of moral nuance was itself a luxury the dead couldn't afford. The safe house existed in the kind of liminal space cities created through urban decay, an abandoned commercial building in Red Hook, too dilapidated for redevelopment, too structurally sound to demolish, existing in the gap between past and future, where people who needed to disappear could fade into shadows. Gisub had owned it through 3 layers of shell companies, maintaining it for exactly this contingency, stocking it with supplies that would sustain 2 people for weeks without outside contact. Sienna helped him through the reinforced security door, his weight against her shoulder, sending pain radiating through her still-healing ribs. The impact of the snowplow collision had rattled her bones like loose teeth, layering fresh agony over the bruise from Edwin's bullet, but she forced her body to operate on pure adrenaline. He'd taken the crash harder than he'd let on, moving with the careful deliberation of someone managing multiple injuries through sheer willpower. Blood still seeped from the gash above his eyebrow, tracking down his face, dripping onto expensive suit fabric that was now ruined beyond any dry cleaner's salvation. Inside, the space contradicted its exterior: finished walls, running water, furniture that looked lived in rather than stored. Someone had maintained this place, kept it ready, understanding that safety required preparation long before danger arrived. Sienna guided Gisub to a leather couch that dominated the main room, then moved to the bathroom to retrieve the first aid kit she'd spotted during their entry. Her hands shook as she gathered supplies: antiseptic, butterfly bandages, gauze, the basic materials for treating trauma that stopped short of requiring hospital intervention. She'd killed Edwin. The knowledge sat in her chest like swallowed glass, sharp and undeniable. Not in the heat of battle, not in immediate self-defense, but with cold calculation, choosing execution over capture, permanence over procedure. The FBI would call it murder. The law would demand prosecution. Every principle she'd once believed in would condemn her. But the women in Gisub's basement would live, and that terrible mathematics felt more like justice than anything the legal system had ever provided. When she returned to the main room, Gisub had removed his ruined suit jacket, his white shirt torn and blood-stained, revealing the full extent of the damage. Bruises bloomed across his ribs where the restraints had held during the crash. His left wrist showed swelling that suggested hairline fractures. And beneath all the immediate trauma, she saw older scars. The roadmap of violence that had made him what he was, proof that survival came with permanent cost. "Let me," she said, kneeling in front of him with the first aid kit. Gisub studied her face, searching for something. Regret, perhaps, or the horror of what she'd done, the moral collapse that should have followed her first kill. Whatever he sought, he apparently didn't find it, because his expression softened into something almost like pride. "You crossed the line," he said quietly, not a question. "I executed a serial killer who wore a badge," Sienna corrected, cleaning the gash above his eyebrow with careful precision. "Edwin would have killed everyone we're protecting. Would have killed me. Would have used the legal system as a weapon until no witnesses remained alive to testify against the people paying him. I removed the threat. That's what operators do. They make hard calls in situations where every option is terrible." "You're justifying it," Gisub observed. "Rationalizing the kill through tactical analysis, military ethics, the greater good mathematics that lets soldiers sleep at night." Sienna's hands stilled, the antiseptic-soaked gauze pressed against his torn skin. "Yes. Is that wrong?" "No," Gisub said, his hand coming up to cover hers, holding it against his face with gentle pressure. "It's survival. It's sanity. It's what you need to do to remain functional after killing someone, even when that someone deserved every round you put in them." His thumb traced circles on her wrist, finding her racing pulse. "But you should know. It doesn't get easier. Each kill, you'll find new ways to rationalize it, new frameworks to justify the decision, and one day, You'll realize you've become the thing you once hunted, and you'll have to decide whether that transformation was worth the lives you saved. Have you? Sienna asked. Decided if it was worth it? Gisab was quiet for a long moment, amber eyes distant, looking at memories rather than the present. I killed my first man when I was 17. Soul. Gang territory dispute. He had a knife. I had my grandfather's pistol. He was going to kill my younger sister to send a message about respecting boundaries. So I shot him, center mass, 3 times. Watched him bleed out on pavement while his friends ran and my sister cried. His jaw tightened. I've killed 47 people since then. Some deserved it. Some were collateral damage. Some were just in the wrong place when I was in a hurry. And every single one haunts me at 3 a.m. when I'm too tired to maintain the rationalizations. He looked at her directly, and Sienna saw the exhaustion beneath his controlled exterior. Not physical, but the bone-deep weariness of carrying too much death for too long. But my sister is alive, he continued. The women downstairs are alive. People who would have been casualties in someone else's war survived because I was willing to be the monster. So yes, Sienna, it was worth it. The nightmares, the scars, the knowledge that I'll never be the good man my grandfather hoped I'd become. All of it was worth it because the people I love are still breathing. Sienna finished bandaging his wounds, processing his words through the lens of her own transformation. She'd crossed the line Edwin had accused her of approaching for years. The boundary between enforcer of law and executor of justice. Between someone who documented crimes and someone who prevented them through permanent solutions. And like Gisab, she'd do it again. Would make the same choice tomorrow if the math demanded it. If the only way to protect innocent people required becoming the thing that made her FBI instructors nervous. The news is calling me the meatpacking killer, she said, focusing on applying butterfly bandages to close the gash. They're saying I went rogue after murdering Edwin, attacked the convoy in a psychotic break, killed 3 officers and injured 7 more. The narrative is written. I'm the monster now. Good, Gisab said, catching her off guard. Monsters get things done that heroes can't. Monsters don't have to justify every action to review boards and congressional committees. Monsters survive because they understand that mercy is a luxury afforded only to people who've never had to protect someone they love, against someone else willing to kill them. He reached into his pocket with his good hand, pulled out something small and metallic. His signet ring, the one he'd given her before his surrender, the one she'd worn during the convoy assault, the one that marked her as his in ways that transcended property or possession. But this was different. This ring was smaller, more delicate, platinum set with a black diamond that caught the dim light and devoured it, turning illumination into something dark and beautiful. Gisab held it up between them, and Sienna understood what he was offering. Not marriage in any traditional sense, but something more binding, more dangerous. In Korea, he said quietly, we call this a hyolmeng, a blood oath. It's not about love, though love can be part of it. It's about loyalty that survives death. Partnership that can't be severed by betrayal or doubt, or the eventual certainty that what we're doing will probably kill us both. He turned the ring, light refracting through the black diamond. You wear this. You're not just under my protection. You are the protection. You speak with my authority, act with my resources, kill with my blessing. You become the weapon I aim at enemies, and I become the shield you hide behind when the world comes for what you've done. Sienna stared at the ring, understanding the weight of what he was offering. Not redemption. She was too far past that for redemption to mean anything. But purpose, direction. A framework for the violence she'd discovered she was capable of. A structure that gave meaning to the darkness she'd embraced. What happens when we disagree? She asked. When your priorities conflict with mine? When the thing you need killed is something I think deserves to live? Then we negotiate, Gisab said simply. Like any partnership, I'm not asking you to be subservient, Sienna. I'm asking you to be my equal in a world that demands blood for every inch of progress. I bring experience, resources, connections, built over decades of surviving in shadows. You bring tactical brilliance, profiling expertise, the kind of strategic mind that can predict behavior 3 moves ahead. Together, we become something neither of us could be alone. A force that protects the people the system abandoned. He held the ring closer, and Sienna saw her reflection in the black diamond's depths. Not the FBI agent she'd been, not even the fugitive she'd become, but something new, forged in violence, tempered by betrayal, sharpened by the understanding that justice and law had divorced so completely that choosing between them meant choosing between empty morality and effective protection. "There's no exit door," Jisub continued, his voice dropping into something almost gentle. "You take this ring, you stay in the grave with me, forever, in the dark, among the monsters. No going back to the bureau, no redemption arc, no return to the life you had before Edwin's bullet introduced you to who you really are." Sienna thought about Portland. About the judge's son who'd raped 17 women and walked free because she'd followed procedure. About Teresa and the 7 other women living in a basement because the system couldn't protect them. About Edwin's body cooling on the Brooklyn Bridge, finally stopped from killing anyone else. She thought about justice. Real justice. Not the kind that existed in courtrooms where lawyers argued about reasonable doubt, but the kind that required blood and sacrifice, and the willingness to become the villain, if that meant innocent people survived another day. "Give me the ring," she said. Jisub's eyes searched hers one final time, looking for doubt, for hesitation, for any sign that she didn't fully understand the magnitude of what this oath represented. Whatever he found satisfied him, because he took her left hand, not the right where his signet ring already sat, but her left, where traditionally promises were worn. He slid the black diamond onto her left ring finger. It sat heavy and dark, a perfect counterweight to the platinum signet ring that already gleamed on her right hand. One for authority, one for devotion. It fit perfectly, sized for her specifically, proof that he'd been planning this moment, preparing for it, understanding that she'd eventually cross the line completely and need something to anchor her on the other side. The ring felt heavy, permanent, like the closing of a door and the opening of another, like the death of who she'd been and the birth of who she'd become. "Heol Mang," Jisub said formally, his voice carrying the weight of ritual. "Blood oath. Your enemies become mine. Your battles become ours. Your death becomes unacceptable, and I will burn the world to prevent it." "Heol Mang," Sienna echoed, tasting the Korean syllables on her tongue, letting them reshape her understanding of partnership and loyalty. "Your wars become mine. Your protection becomes ours. Your survival becomes my priority, and I will kill anyone who threatens it." The moment stretched between them, heavy with promise and possibility and the terrible certainty that they'd just committed to something that would probably destroy them both eventually. But destruction felt distant, theoretical, less important than the immediate knowledge that she was no longer alone in the darkness. Jisub pulled her closer with his good arm, and Sienna went without resistance, settling against him with careful attention to his injuries. They sat in silence, two broken people who'd found each other through violence, held together by shared trauma and the understanding that survival sometimes required becoming the thing you once feared. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance, the city searching for them, hunting them, convinced they were the threat rather than the solution. Inside the safe house, in the liminal space between law and justice, Sienna felt something she hadn't experienced since Portland. Peace. Not the comfortable peace of righteousness, but the hard-won peace of alignment. Her actions finally matching her beliefs, her violence finally serving protection rather than procedure, her darkness finally put to use defending light rather than documenting its extinguishing. Her phone buzzed against her hip. She pulled it out, expecting news alerts about the manhunt, more evidence of her transformation from hero to villain in the public consciousness. Instead, she found a message from an unknown number. FBI closed Cole investigation, but CIA just opened one. Multiple agency task force. International implications. They know about the witnesses. They're coming for all of it. Run. Sienna showed the screen to Jisub. He read it without surprise, without fear. Just the calm assessment of someone who'd been expecting this escalation. "Your handler had powerful friends," he said. "Edwin's death just became an international incident. The corruption network he served spans multiple agencies, foreign intelligence services, cartel operations in 6 countries. They can't let us expose that infrastructure. Can't let the witnesses testify to connections that reach into Congress, federal courts, law enforcement at every level. So they'll send everything they have, Sienna concluded. Not just NYPD anymore. FBI, CIA, probably DEA, and ATF for good measure. A task force with unlimited resources and authorization to use lethal force. Yes, Jisub confirmed. He stood, moving to a cabinet that opened to reveal weapons storage that made his club's arsenal look modest. Military-grade equipment that shouldn't exist outside active war zones. The kind of hardware that suggested he'd been preparing for exactly this contingency. Which means we stop running. We dig in, we fortify, and we make them understand that attacking us costs more than they're willing to pay. He selected a compact assault rifle, checked its action with practiced ease, then turned back to Sienna with something like excitement in his eyes. Not fear, not resignation, but the anticipation of someone who'd finally found a worthy challenge. You wanted justice, he said. Real justice, not the legal fiction that lets powerful people operate without consequence. This is your chance. We don't just survive the task force. We expose the corruption it's protecting. We force the witnesses into public testimony. We turn Edwin's death into the catalyst that brings down everyone who profited from his murders. Sienna stood, testing her weight on still healing ribs, feeling the black diamond ring heavy on her finger. A physical reminder of the oath she'd just sworn. She thought about Teresa and the 7 other women depending on them, thought about every other victim Edwin's network had created, every life destroyed because the system protected predators more effectively than it protected prey. How long until they find this location? She asked. 72 hours. Maybe less if they have access to my financial records and satellite surveillance. Jisub handed her a tablet, its screen showing architectural blueprints, tactical assessment data. The kind of operational planning that suggested he'd been wargaming this scenario for months. We have 3 days to turn a safe house into a fortress, document everything we know about Edwin's network, and prepare for a siege that'll make Nocturne look like a minor inconvenience. Sienna took the tablet, her tactical mind already processing the data, identifying vulnerabilities and creating defensive solutions. This was what she'd been trained for at Quantico. Asymmetric warfare, protection of high-value assets, creating defensible positions against superior forces. She'd just never expected to be the high-value asset, or that the superior forces would be wearing badges she'd once considered sacrosanct. 3 days, she repeated. Then she smiled, cold and dangerous, feeling the transformation complete itself in ways that went beyond rings and oaths. They're expecting a fugitive, someone scared, desperate, making mistakes. Instead, they're walking into a prepared defensive position manned by the best profiler the Bureau ever disgraced and a Mafia boss who survived 3 gang wars and 4 federal investigations. Jisub's answering smile matched hers. Predatory, certain, absolutely committed to the violence ahead. Let them come, he said. We have witnesses to protect, corruption to expose, and a blood oath to honor. If they want us, they'll have to go through hell to get us. He held out his hand. Sienna took it, feeling calluses earned from violence, warmth that contradicted every profile she'd ever built about cold-blooded killers, strength that promised partnership rather than domination. Together, they turned toward the tactical planning table, toward 3 days of preparation, toward the siege that would either validate their transformation or end them both. Either way, Sienna thought, at least she'd die as herself. Not the compromised agent following corrupt orders, but the weapon aimed at evil's heart, fired by someone who understood that true justice required blood, sacrifice, and the willingness to become the monster if that meant innocent people survived the night. The black diamond on her finger caught the light and devoured it, turning illumination into shadow, transforming promise into weapon. She was ready for war.